Namaste and welcome back to the video course on watershed management. In module number 5 on socio-economic aspects of watershed management, in lecture number 21, today we will discuss integrated developments, water legislation and implementation issues. So, here in this lecture some of the topics covered include integrated watershed developments, water management policy, water legislation, national water policy, watershed plans and appraisal and implementation issues. Some of the keywords for today's lecture include integrated developments, water legislation and watershed plans. So, as we discussed earlier, this integrated water resource development and management is one of the important topic nowadays in the agenda of many of the countries all over the world. So, it is not simply a development of a watershed, but we have to see the overall development of the various resources within the watershed and the people, and by giving emphasis on the social upliftment of the people. So, that is the essence of integrated watershed development and management. So, that way, as we discussed earlier also, IWRDM or integrated watershed development and management is an effective means for conservation and development of land, water resources and other type of resources within the watershed. So, by giving an emphasis on the overall development of the people and overall the system. So, that way IWRDM integrates the socio-cultural, economic, biophysical and technological aspects of development within the watershed. So, that way it is not simply development of some system like check dam or the say some of the development of land or water, but it is the holistic development within the watershed. So, there are a number of concerns as far as IWRDM or integrated watershed development and management is concerned. So, some of these are listed here. IWRDM, the major concern is the improvement of the livelihoods of local communities on a sustainable basis. So, we can see that most of the time the watershed will get deteriorated due to the human influence in a negative way. So, to make it in a positive way, and then if sufficient livelihoods are available for the local people, then there will not be a deterioration to the watershed and then appropriate development will take place. So, that way IWRDM requires balancing economic needs and expectations with environmental concerns. So, so that we can avoid degradation of the natural resource base, in particular soil and water components. So, that way in an IWRDM framework, so we have to see the overall developments in an environmental friendly way, in an ecological friendly way, and also so that the total development of the people, of the flora and fauna and everything takes place. So, that way of course, as we discussed in the previous lectures also, community participation is very important in the case of IWRDM. And so that say whenever some intervention takes place within the watershed, say for few years, so the effects will be long term, and this long term sustainability should be there, and so that way things can be better in a better way adopted. So, IWRDM with the community participation is the main emphasis of the development aspects as far as the development in a particular watershed is concerned. So, that way the keywords of IWRDM include sustainability, efficient use of local resources and indigenous knowledge. So, whatever say the various things within a watershed varies from one watershed to another watershed. So, as we discussed, there is no commonality between the various things within from one watershed to another watershed. So, that way we have to see that we use indigenous technologies, we are meeting when we are going for watershed management plans, we meet with the local needs and the aspirations of the people are met. So, that way we have to plan the development as far as a watershed within the framework of integrated watershed development and management. So, as I mentioned also earlier, so finally what we are looking for improved quality of life of the people and then ecological improvements and environmental sustainability. When we consider the watershed developments within the perspective of integrated water resource management or IWRDM, so we can see that say the watershed, which is the area, so that way the various natural resources like land, then water, forest, etc. So, these are all the natural resources. Then human resources. So, human influence should be in a positive way. So, we are while when we develop say watershed development plans or watershed management projects. So, we have to see that all these influence are in a positive way. So, human resources we have to and the natural resources come together, and then that way depending upon the area, depending upon the watershed. So, we have to see that various institutions and communities coming together for the development. So, that way we have to develop the village institutions and so that we can ensure community participation. And then say within this perspective, by considering the natural resources, human resources, and then the village institutions, we have to develop say capacity building to be taken place, and then so that for all these things support like financial support, economical support, and all other things should come from various sources from government and other agencies. So, when we say consider the development activities within a watershed, so like say water is concerned, we can go for water harvesting or development of the lift irrigation schemes, and then land is concerned, land development for say better agriculture like water and soil conservation activities. Then the forest is concerned, we can go for further afforestation activities. And then say we have to manage the forest in such a way that the forest say various components within the forest is not degraded. So, that way we have to look into joint forest management, and then we have to see the community support services. So, as I mentioned, it is not only simply the area and resources, but within the for the people. So, overall development should take place. So, whatever like educational help or the medical or the other kinds of social activities, all those community support services should be there, and then infrastructure and energy services should also come into picture. So, like that road development or the development of ponds, development of various say centers for leisure and all other things should be developed, and then energy needs of the people. So, that is another important aspects within the perspective of watershed management, integrated watershed management development. So, there if the sufficient energy sources are not there, then people will be say going to the forest and collecting the wood. So, that way the forest degradation will take place. So, all those things should come together, and then say like once this say the various schemes are implemented, then there will be on farm employment, that like agriculture activities will be enhanced and more activities will take place, so that the employment opportunities will be improved, and then off farm employment like various other direct and indirect type of other employment will be developed within the area, and then economical development will be taking place, since more income will be there to the people, more water will be available, more land will be developed for agricultural activities. So, overall the economical development will be taking place, and then once the economical development takes place, people will be say families will send their children to the school, and women will get sufficient time for all other activities, since they do not have to take water from faraway places for their daily needs. So, that way when we look into all these things when taking place within the perspective of integrated watershed development and management. So, final output will be improved quality of life and social upliftment within the watershed in a very environmental friendly way, and with a very positive ecological development will takes place. So, this is the typical framework for IWRDM or integrated watershed development and management, which we can practice in many areas, and in many successful cases if we analyze what has happened So that we can see that most of the time the implementation agencies are taking the IWRDM or IWRDM integrated watershed development and management perspectives were taken care, and then the projects all were in a success. So that way we can see. So when we are looking for this kinds of development, IWRDM perspective we have to consider. So that way we can see that integrated development or integrated water resource development and management, people participation is very essential. So that way say a typical block diagram is given here. So like say there can be groups of villages, so we said maybe up to 10 to 15 villages can come together, so that they are the volunteers to implement the schemes, and then watershed development committees can be formed for the particular local watershed. And then say these committees can form various group like water users group, then self-help group, then human thrift and credit group. So like that various groups can be formed, and then community organization organizer can take the lead role, and then liaison between the various groups. And then say what are the development taking place, that can be reported, and then also say the community organizer can be acted as a friend, advisor, guide or facilitator for various or village volunteers or committees. And then say they can have various schemes can be organized within the watershed development schemes, and then say through the available funds, say payment and other things can be done. And then the watershed activities can be taken within a very organized way by studying the technical feasibility, and then say the budget estimate can be obtained through various means from government or other agencies, and then further implementation through the committees or through the volunteers can be done. So this shows how effective people participation can take place within the perspective of integrated water resource development and management, and so that the projects will be a success. So that way we have to coordinate, so we have to first organize various committees, various groups within the watershed, and then the organizer has to play a role of liaisoning between these committees or groups to implement various schemes, watershed development schemes, and then maintain it and then sustain it. So that way when we are developing a watershed or water management policy, we have to look into various aspects like supply side management. So that way how much water can be supplied, say for example if we consider water as a resource, or we can consider any other type of resource. So that we have to consider various technical measures, how much water can be obtained, say once a check dam is made, or once a borehole or borewell is initiated. So that way we have to see. And then we have to see demand side management, like the say how much water is required for domestic needs, agricultural purposes or various other means, and then we have to see the various financial aspects, and then various policy based measures we have to look into when we look into the overall water management policies. And then most of the time we have to focus on policy based measures for water resource management. So we should have a clear cut policy either on the side of say supply side or demand side, and then we have to integrate between the supply side and demand side, so that sufficient water is available. Say for example if we consider water as a resource, sufficient water is available, so that we can frame appropriate water management policy. So that way when we look into this water management policy, so this we have to do in a series of 3 steps. Like in the first step we have to enable the environment, so we should have appropriate policies to be framed, and then appropriate legislation to be passed by either assembly or parliament, and then say to implement various schemes, maybe we have to the government has to give certain incentives to the stakeholders, Then comes the institutional rules. So, say everything should be done in a organized way. So, we have to see organizational framework and then institutional capacity building within the watershed, and then by considering the stakeholders within the watershed. And then say we have to see the management instruments, like how to get these appropriate fund for that particular scheme, or how to implement the particular watershed project scheme, and then how we can go ahead with the say appropriate implementation, and getting the benefits out of that, and then managing the overall system. So, that way we have to see when we develop, say for example, water resources, when we develop water management policy say for a particular area. So, we can see that if you go through say most of the say country level water policies, most of the nations they will have their own type of policies which will be suited for various requirements of the people. So, national water resource policies say play a major role in the implementation of either watershed schemes or water development schemes, and then also related to agricultural aspects. So, that way national water resource policy sets goals and objectives for management of water resource at national scale. And these policies include say whatever to be covered, say specific regions, say like where drought prone area, or say humid regions, or like that, say as per the requirement. Then catchments, then shared or transboundary water resources within integrated water resource management framework, and the interbasin transfers. So, you can see that say for example, major rivers are concerned, these rivers will be passing through one state to another state. So, as say for example, India is concerned, water is a state subject. So, that way we have to see the government of India or the central government has to should have appropriate policies, or they have to set certain norms and regulations, so that water sharing is taking place between states, or even when the river is passing from one country to another country. Say for example, river Ganges it goes from India to Bangladesh. So, we have to see that there are no conflicts between the countries or between the states, and then the water should be shared in a very environmentally friendly way, and then also in an appropriate way. So, that way either the transboundary water resource or interbasin transfers, all these aspects we have to consider when we frame the national water resource policies. So, a national policy may include following themes, like what will be the jurisdiction and delegation. So, what will be the role of say federal government or central government, then what will be the roles of the state governments or district level to the panchayat level or the grassroots level, then the extent to which water management is decentralized or consolidated. So, whether we have to deal the water as a resource in a centralized way or decentralized way, and then what is the up to what level we have to decentralize, and then the use of economic incentives, say for example, to include to implement say various watershed development schemes, say government of India or the central government may have to give various incentives to the states or to the district level or to the watershed level. So, that we have to see the economic incentives what can be given. Then capacity building to meet institutional challenges. So, that is also important. So, how we can develop the capacity of the stakeholders, and then how the various committees can be formed, and then how they can come together to meet the institutional challenges. And then monitoring and control to reduce ecosystem degradation. So, once various projects are implemented or for the given system, we should appropriate monitoring system so that to say make sure that there is no ecosystem degradation takes place, but we have to improve the system, and so constant monitoring and controlling is essential. These are some of the important themes which should be included included in any of the national water policy when we consider water as a resource and then within the perspective of integrated water resource development and management. So, that way when we deal with the water, we have to see the policy as integrated water policy. So, we have to see various aspects of the development of the water resource and then its sharing and then looking after so that there is no degradation taking place to the ecosystem. So, some of the important points to be considered for effective integrated policy making are we have to clarify the roles and goals of government and stakeholders. So, central government or state governments, so what will be their roles, how to say play their each ministry's role or each department roles, and then how each department should collaborate with the stakeholders. And then the second important point is government as regulator and then as organizer of the participatory process. So, say we have to consider the needs of the people and then how it can be particular schemes can be implemented, and as a last resort adjudicator in case of conflict. Say for example, if conflict takes place from one state to another state, when a river passes from one state to another state, say for example between Tamil Nadu, Kerala or Karnataka, Tamil Nadu for Kaveri issues. So, then the government of India or the central government should have a policy how to deal with that kind of conflicts. Then identification of key water resource issues. So, the government policy should specifically say how to deal with the drought area or the how to deal with the flooding, all those things there should be appropriate policies related to water. Then water is a social and economic good. So, we have to see that it is water is not only as a social good as people needs, all the ecosystem people, everybody needs water. So, it is a social good, but it is also an economic good, since we have to invest lot of money to develop appropriate system. So, that way we have to see we have to develop appropriate policies, or we have to design policies to allocate resources in an effective way, so that by considering water as social and economic good. Then make explicit in the policy the links between land use and other economic activities. So, that is also essential when we deal with the development of water policies. Then take into account trade-offs between short-term costs and then long-term gains. So, for example, when we are going to develop a dam or when we construct a dam, so it is they say 500 crores or 1000 crores of rupees to be spent, it is a short time cost, but the gains will be long time. So, we should appropriate policies to look after say what will be the trade off between the short time cost and then long time gains, and then also we have to see the environmental impact of various schemes. So, that way when we develop a water policy, we have to develop by considering all these aspects in an integrated way. So, now let us look into while developing the water policy, we have to see the water rights. So, what are the rights of the individuals or the people or the state or as the federal government. So, what are the rights or say one catchment to another catchment, what will be the right. So, all those things we have to define appropriately. So, say first aspect is right to use water, and good water law must be flexible enough to permit reform in response to technological change and socio-economic need. So, that is very important. We have to see what kind of say technological development takes place, accordingly the various aspects should be changed, and then socio-economic needs should be the most important aspect in the development of this type of policies. The tenets of effective and beneficial use are water must not be to be obtained for speculation or let run to waste. So, available water should be used in a very effective way. So, water should not be wasted and then should not be put for speculation between various agencies, and the end use must be a socially acceptable use. So, whatever use it is going to put, the water is to put. So, that way we have to see it is a socially acceptable use. Then water is not to be misused, some, say for example, like say some farmers say draw so much of groundwater so that others will not get, and then they may try to sell. So, that kind of misuse should not take place, and the use must be reasonable as compared with other uses. So, if for agriculture purpose or any other purpose, so the use of the water for by the individual or stakeholder should be in a reasonable way. So, these are some of the important aspects when we have to develop a water policy, the various rights what is to be considered. So, now let us look further aspects, further characteristics and other things which are to be considered when we develop legislation for water or water quality. So, some of the important characteristics to be considered are the measures to protect the quality of water resources. So, that aspect should be there in the legislation. So, this can be preventive or in a corrective way. So, preventive measures include effluent and discharge regulations, say as far as water quality is concerned, then technical standards and requirements for treating polluted effluents, economic instruments as well as quality standards for receiving waters. Then the legislation sets out the principles upon which pollution control is based. And then if you consider corrective measures, that may include cease and desist orders, then compensation for damage and economic losses, and then abatement and remediation requirements. So, if any pollution takes place, that should be reduced, and then we have to see that the polluted things should be remediated. So, most of the time when we put such laws, it should be in such a way that the polluter pays principle should be put, so that the polluter should have a responsibility to pay for the damages caused or to remediate what was created. So, especially water quality issues are concerned, the legislation what should be formed by the governments should have all these characteristics, like either preventive way or corrective way, or there should be preventive measures and corrective measures, and then most of the time the best policy will be polluter pays principle should be applied as far as the legislation for water quality is concerned. Enabling institutional framework, including the legal roles and responsibilities of institutions and their interrelationship. So, that aspects we have to see, and then mechanisms for stakeholders to participate in water resource management, then conflict resolution mechanisms, then provision of water for basic human needs and standards of service, then tariff and water pricing systems, then a clear mechanism for transfer of water rights to minimize conflicts and risk of social unrest. So, say we can see that say already in say most of the countries there are number of legislation as far as water is concerned, so called water legislation, either say water quantity is concerned or quality is concerned. So, within the framework when we are discussing about integrated water resource management, by considering all the socio-economical aspects of the people of within the watershed or within the area. So, then say we have to see that say we have to modify or we have to reform the existing legislation, so that now the emphasis should be enable institutional framework, say if it is not existing within the water legislation, and then say we have to see that there are mechanisms for stakeholders to participate in various water related issues or water resource development and management. So, that is the now the new the trend nowadays, and then if any conflicts takes place between the states or between the catchments or between the stakeholders, then there should be some mechanism to sort out these kinds of conflicts. And then also, as water is an economic good, we have to see that say appropriate tariff and water pricing are implemented. So, all these aspects we have to see as far as reforms for existing legislation or when we go for new legislation also. So, some of the guidelines and policies while making the water legislation listed here. So, most important policies and guidelines for watershed management include. So, as watershed is concerned, we have to see various resources, land, then water, then agricultural or forest management, all these aspects we have to consider. So, that way say the watershed management policies say should include first of all agricultural policy. Then agriculture policy means say there should be a national agriculture policy which provides strong support to the watershed development programs, and it should reflect the observed commitments of government to take watershed management programs more aggressively, including provision of necessary financial and institutional support. So, this is very essential within the framework of IWRM or Integrated Water Resource Management. So, that way the appropriate framework should be set for agricultural policy. Then second one is water policy, which we already discussed in the last few slides. So, we should appropriate water policies by considering the quantity issues, quality issues, conflict resolution or the appropriate sharing. So, water policy should be appropriately should be done. And then land policy. So, land policy generally protects the interests of small and marginal farmers. So, you can see that in many countries most of the time the land policy is always favoring the rich farmers or the farmers who have got so much of land, and small farmers or marginal farmers are always marginalized in many ways. So, but we have to say for overall development, social upliftment, socio-economical development, we have to see that the interests of small and marginal farmers we have to consider, and that way one important aspect to be considered is land policy. And then forest policy means we have to see that the existing forest is not degraded and further afforestation should take place, and the minimum area should be kept for forest development and management, as the forest development may influence overall development and management for the area. Then of course, watershed management guidelines. So, which way to manage various resources within the watershed, and then how to say collaborate between the stakeholders, or how to take the help of the community as far as watershed. So, all these issues we have to consider when we develop guidelines and policies for watershed management. As I mentioned already, water policy identifies water management as one of the most crucial elements in development planning of a country. Water policy states that watershed management through soil erosion, catchment area treatment, preservation of forests and increasing forest cover and construction of check dams should be promoted. So, within the water policy there should be say policy or guidelines for watershed development, say prevention of soil erosion, then catchment area treatment, and then development of various rainwater harvesting schemes, etc. And then also say environmental issues are very important. So, environmental laws should be framed within the watershed management guidelines and policies itself. So, environmental laws often dictate the planning and actions that agencies take to manage the watershed. Then some laws are required that planning to be done, others can be used to make a plan legally enforceable, and others set out the ground rules for what can and cannot be done in development and planning. So, there should be certain rules and regulations or policy guidelines, so that what can be done and what cannot be done. So, all these things should be appropriately defined when we develop guidelines and policies for watershed management. So, otherwise there will be always problems or conflicts between the stakeholders, or between one watershed to another watershed, or one say the upstream river basin holders to the downstream river basin holders. So, in most of the countries and states, so they have developed their own rules and regulations or laws regarding watershed management. So, Government of India also has made appropriate rules and regulations, and then this has come under the umbrella of national water policy, which we will be discussing say after a few slides. So, now say as far as the policies and guidelines are concerned, the financial aspect is plays a major role, and then appropriate investment plans or investment policies also should be made as far as watershed management plans are concerned. So government have a responsibility for investment policies that affect the water sector. So it can be either as a development of dams or development of wells or various watershed development schemes. Then macroeconomic policies like trade policies affect the pace and type of development in the water sector. So government has to see appropriate macroeconomic policies are developed, and then tax incentives might result in the growth of water intensive industries. So industries are concerned, say if availability of water, free water or tax incentives, say if appropriate water development schemes are done, so that way industries may come forward to implement those schemes. Then public investment, so how the various schemes can attract public investment, like investment in many sectors may affect demand for water, such as housing, new town, industry development, transport, power and energy, agriculture and tourism. So that way we have to see. Then public and private investment in the water sector itself. So water sector needs potentially very large financial needs for irrigation, water supply, wastewater treatment, flood and environment protection. So as government cannot spend all the money, or all investment cannot be done alone. So government has to see public private partnership takes place. So PPP, public private partnership, so that is needed in the water sector also, whether for the development of new reservoirs or dams, or the watershed development schemes, or water transfer from one basin to another basin. So that way public private partnership and then private investment, government should welcome in an appropriate way, so that sufficient investment can be done in the water sector. So when we discuss all these water policies or guidelines and then within the organizational framework, we have to see what are the important roles and responsibilities. So here some of the important points are listed. So like first we have to develop a policy. So policy formulation is important. So the policy formulation can be either through ministries like Water Resource Ministry or Agriculture Ministry for the center or states. Then education and promotion. So whatever schemes have been developed, the government has to see that all the stakeholders know about that, and that should be promoted. Then networking and information exchange between the watershed, so from people to people, that should take place. Then regulation, control and enforcement. So appropriate rules and regulations should be put, and then control measures should be developed, and then surveillance and monitoring. So as far as watershed development schemes, whether any deterioration is taking place or all the developments are in a positive way, so that way we have to see the appropriate monitoring to be done. Then allocation and supply of water. Once a scheme is developed, we have to see that it is appropriately allocated for various needs, and so that the stakeholders equity will be there between the stakeholders. Then flood control and risk mitigation. So many areas there will be flood problem, and some other areas there may be drought problem. So in all these the framework should be there to deal with wherever flood problems are there, how to deal with that flood control. So some of the measures, some of the projects may be for flood control, and some schemes may be for drought mitigation. So that way we have to see the risk associated with either droughts or floods. Then water treatment and reuse. So as water as a resource, when people use it become polluted, so that way appropriate treatment should be given, and then reuse we have to always encourage, so that water recycling and reuse also play a major role, so that sufficient water is available locally in the area itself. Then conservation and protection. So water conservation projects or water resource protection should be we have to emphasize on this. Then pollution control and water quality management. So we can see that due to the industrial revolution for the last few decades, say including groundwater, so most of the resources have been polluted. So, we have to see that appropriate measures or pollution control and water quality management framework, appropriate policies are made, and this legislation are carried out, so that appropriate level all these aspects can be done within the integrated water resource management framework. So, here this flow chart, so here I have put when we develop water policy and legislation, so there should be say we have to consider various aspects which will be coming, say like the environment or the resources, then economic development, then population, and so appropriate policies or legal framework should be made. So that the political system say existing within the country, they have to deal with the economic development or the legal framework. So, they have to make appropriate water laws and water policies. So, say on a watershed scale basis, appropriate water institution should be formed, and then appropriate way the water administration can be carried out. So, finally, there should be better performance as far as water resource is concerned, so that the socio-economic development or upliftment should take place, and sufficient quantity of water should be available, water quality should be good, and there should not be any pollution for the existing resources. So, that way appropriate water policy and legislation should be carried out. So, now whatever we have discussed is say forming the appropriate guidelines or policies as far as water legislation is concerned within the framework of integrated water resource management. So, now let us look some of the water legislation, say as a typical example, let us consider India. So, say India is concerned, number of water legislations are there, have been made in the last few decades. So, here water in Indian constitution, water in entry of 56 of union list and entry 17 of state list, water is a major theme. Article 246 and Article 262 empowers Parliament to make law regarding development and management of say interstate rivers. So, as I mentioned earlier, water is a state subject, but central government has an advisory role, and then wherever conflicts takes place, government of India can interfere in a positive way. So, Article 262 specifies that Parliament may by law provide that neither a Supreme Court or any other court shall exercise jurisdiction with respect to of interstate river disputes. So, generally when these kinds of dispute comes, Government of India forms appropriate tribunals, and these tribunals have the full power to say take appropriate action by considering the viewpoints of various states or various parties. So that so and most of this the ruling by these tribunals cannot be questioned in courts. So, that way these water tribunals play a major role whenever conflicts arises. So, then say various legislations in India is concerned, there are legislation for ownership of water, then withdrawal of water, then usage of water, or and then water quality issues are concerned, or wastewater disposal is also concerned. So, in the Constitution of India, surface water and groundwater is not defined separately, but water as a single resource is considered. So, ownership of water, say for example, even 19th century itself, the Eastment Act 1882 says about the ownership of water. And then say withdrawal of water is concerned, it is actually a state subject, but say as per the framework put by the Parliament, some of the states have enacted and implemented water resource legislation. Then usage is concerned, Government of India Act like Water Prevention and Control of Pollution, say the various acts in 77, 1919, 2003 rules thereof for providing for the collection of cess on water consumed on bulk. So, bulk water tariff schemes, some guidelines are already given, and then wastewater disposal or water quality is concerned. Also, Government of India Act, Water Prevention and Control Pollution Act of 1974, 1998 define various norms as far as how to deal with the wastewater, and then how to keep the water quality, and then what way to deal with various say cases of water pollution by industries or by any other agencies. So, that way well framed rules and regulations are available in India, say as so called water legislations. So, then as I mentioned, say by considering the various aspects, a national water policy has been framed in India and first adopted in 1987 and then further formulated in 2002. So, national water policy is important by considering the various issues say on a river basin scale or watershed scale, or by considering the various needs like agricultural uses or the domestic uses or industrial use. So, this national water policy advocates water resource of the country should be brought within the category of utilizable resource to the maximum possible extent. So, some of the salient features of this national water policy of Government of India include policy promotes use of non-conventional methods such as traditional water harvesting, rooftop rainwater harvesting, etc. Then water transfer to water scarce region, say through interbasin transfer or other means. Then the national water policy encourages people participation in all the schemes. Then public private partnership is always encouraged. Then water resource planning at a hydrologic unit, not on political unit. So, water is concerned as a resource should be developed and planned and managed not on a state or say, district level, but watershed level or river basin level. So, all this national water policy can be obtained in www.rmin.nic.in, the Ministry of Water Resource website. So, then further this national water policy directs states to devise its own water policy. So, national water policy, the frameworks are given, and based upon that each state can formulate its own policy. So that that can be practiced in an effective way. So, as far as water allocation is concerned, say national water policy say give the allocation priorities, like first should be for drinking water, second should be for irrigation hydropower, then third should be for ecological, and fourth for agro industries, then fifth for non-agricultural industries, and sixth for navigation. So, most of the states this based upon national water policy, they have the states have made their own policies, and most of the time these priorities are kept on the same way, other with a few exceptions like state of Maharashtra. Then say some of the major emphasis on this national water policies include the need for efficient pricing system and transparent subsidy structure for disadvantaged and poor. So, even though water is a social good, it is also an economical good. So, appropriate pricing should be there, but of course, we have to see sufficient water is available to the disadvantaged and poor people. Then transfer the water management to user groups and local bodies. Then private sector participation water sector. Then undertaking a phased program for improvement of water quality based on polluter pay principle. As I already mentioned, this is one of the important principles which is adopted. Polluter should pay for the remediation or to recovery. Then need based economic activities on the water zoning of the country. Then prioritizing the need of drought prone areas. So, all those issues sufficient emphasis is given, and that way this is a good document as a Government of National Water Policy, and many of the states have made their own state policy also. So, then now let us come back to say once the coming back to watershed management and plans. So, we have to formulate appropriate watershed plans, and then we have to put it in appropriate format, and then while implementing we have to appraise various project schemes in an appropriate way. So, that way here let us discuss a few of the important steps to consider watershed plans and appraisal. So, say for example, when we consider water as a resource within the watershed, so some of the important steps to consider when we go for watershed plans and appraisal include develop a water use inventory. So, there we have to gather all the information from the people, so through surveys, recognition survey, then available water sources like ponds, lakes, then river system or the wells, then water balance study we have to carry out, how much water is the needed for the people or not for the ecosystem, and how much is excess or how much is the deficit. Then setting goals and priorities. So, we have to set, say, for the future what should be the goals or what should be the project to be implemented and what are the priorities that all should be set. Then identify water management options, so appropriate alternatives can be formed, and then economic analysis can be carried out and define a plan of action. Then implement water management plan implementation and monitoring, then implementation schedules and budgets. So, we have to see that appropriate schedule is made, then budget provisions are obtained, and then appropriate committees or staffs are available, and then we have to also should have a monitoring plan. So, when we consider in a holistic way the various watershed management plans and appraisals. So, then now let us see some of the implementation issues as far as watershed plans are concerned. So, classifying critical watersheds, we say we can classify and then we can establish priorities for conservation and management strategies. Then we can identify critical threats, say for example, if it is as far as forest is concerned or surface water is concerned or groundwater is concerned, the quantity or quality or pollution issues. Then making watershed management recommendations to ensure sustainability, then clean water availability, then identifying system-wide controlling process and mechanisms to distinguish environmental indicators, then recommending land use impact mitigation, habitat restoration programs, etc. So, these are some of the aspects when we go for watershed management plans and implementation. These are some of the issues which we have to consider. Then some of the important implementation issues include we have to analyze socio-economic and economic value of the various schemes. Then we have to ensure technical assistance in the design and installation of management measures. Then we have to provide training and follow-up support to stakeholders. Then we have to manage funding mechanisms and we have to track the expenditures. Then we have to conduct the land treatment and water quality monitoring activities. Then various measures and schedules and milestones we can make for the implementation of the plans, and then we have to see, we can see that these are all met. Then we can communicate between all these aspects from between the stakeholders and then funding agencies or the various government agencies. So, some of the implementation problems here I have listed, like when we implement watershed management plans. So, what are the implementation problems, like say insufficient staff assigned to monitoring. So, most of the time due to lack of funds, sufficient staff will not be there. Then funds allocated may be diverted for other purposes. Then monitoring locations are widely dispersed and remote, leading to logistical bottlenecks. So, mainly when we deal with river basins or watershed, large area we have to deal. So, that way monitoring locations will be far away. So, it is always a problem. Then staff is not properly trained. So, local people are, if they are not properly trained to carry out appropriate work in an appropriate way, then always problem. Then community loses interest, so that there is no community participation. Then so all the schemes should be simple, there should not be any complexities, and then in a very efficient way to should be then inexpensive monitoring should be required. Then appropriate evaluation system should be formulated. So, these are some of the problems when we deal with the watershed management plans, appraisal and implementations are concerned. So, now before closing this lecture, let us look into the importance of development of appropriate policies and legislation as far as the either water management or energy management is concerned. So, let us consider a case study, cooperative management of electricity and groundwater. This case study is Gujarat Jyotir Gram Yojana or Jyotir Gram scheme. So, the actually in 1980s the state governments made a regulation. There was a shift of tariff regime to flat tariff based on horsepower or how much energy is used. So, for various uses, like especially for irrigation purpose, people pump water from the groundwater using from the bore wells. So, there is a simple flat tariff has been implemented. So, some of the implications were very sharp increase in electricity to say while pumping water from tube wells, rampant corruption in terms of billing and meter reading, then flat based tariff system under subsidy regime, and then so excessive withdrawals of groundwater, so groundwater level gone down drastically. Then some of the rich farmers started to sell even water to the poor people, so resulting in development of informal groundwater markets in the state. So, say the situation say has been a very difficult situation in 1980s and 90s. So, returning, so again once these problems were understood, going back to volumetric tariff system was not so easy, since it was popular amongst the farmers, since farmers lobby was also very strong in the state. So, Gujarat Electricity Board suffered heavy loss due to power supply to agriculture consumers. So, resulting gradual reduction in power supply. So, farmers found alternatives of using capacitor to cover single phase to 3-phase power, so that they can take more power, but a flat only a small amount to be paid. So, getting 18 to 20 hours of electricity. So, this heavy theft of electricity has led to huge financial loss to the utility, and excessive withdrawal of groundwater, then construction of groundwater wells, many wells were come up, and then so practice such as cooperative bore well drilling, all those were taken place say in 1980s and 1990s. Then say after studying all these things, a scheme was formulated called this say Jyotirgram Yojana or Jyotirgram scheme. So, the solution was provide quality power to the farmers and convert flat based tariff system into a metered tariff system. So, this was also requirement of the funding agency, so called Asian Development Bank. So, providing logistic is always problematic to implement this scheme, may attract massive opposition of farmers. So, through metering process was though metering process was initiated, but at very slower rate than ADB's expectation. So, the result was ADB suspended, or Asian Development was suspended loan installments to the state governments. So, then the scheme was implemented. Earlier a flat regime of supply to villages through single feeder line, but then a scheme was separate agricultural feeder and non-agricultural feeder has been implemented within the state. Rural feeder of entire state was rewired into agricultural and non-agricultural feeder at a cost of rupees 1,700 crores from 2006 to 2007. So, that way so the separation of agricultural feeder from non-agricultural use has been made. So, 8 to 12 hours quality power to farms, 24-hour non-stop power to villages for domestic use, then gradual increase of flat based tariff system to approach average cost consumed by tube well, then intelligent scheduling and management of rationed power supply to farm sector has been implemented. So, these details are available in this reference. So, comparison between before and after the Jyotirgram Yojana or Jyotirgram scheme. Before, the tube wells get 12 to 13 hours of 3-phase power, but after farmers get 8 hours per day of high voltage uninterrupted power supply. Then flat tariff rupees 350 to 500 say per year, but now flat tariff is rupees 850 per say connection per year. Then massive use of capacitors to convert before, but afterwards capacitors out since it was not possible to put. The non-farm users de-electrified because of capacitors. Now, non-farm users get 24-hour non-stop single phase power. Then most motor burnt out and rewinding, these all kinds of expenses took place earlier, and after the implementation motor burnout at the minimum. Now, new connections not available earlier, and then say after this scheme was implemented, new connections were possible, but in a restricted way. Gujarat Electricity Board saved a lot of money. You can see that the electricity subsidies has been reduced from about 786 million to $388 million from say 2001 to 2007. So, the outcome was power supply to agriculture fell from 13 billion units in 2001 to 9 billion units in 2005-6, and groundwater raft is expected to fell only very slowly. So, groundwater recovery also took place. So, that were the outcome of this. And some of the lessons learned: policy based measures under demand side management. Then groundwater withdrawal could be curbed in the depleted areas with the help of policy based innovative solution like Jyotirgram Yojana. Subsidy restructuring is big issue, so appropriate scheme to be developed, and these kinds of schemes reduce the misery of the poor people. So, they get sufficient electricity and sufficient power supply to match peak irrigation periods compared to earlier schemes. So, these are some of the important references for today's lecture. So, before closing for today's lecture, some of the say tutorial questions, say critically study the various water legislation in India. The references are given here. Discuss how the various water legislation help to improve water management plans in India. Review the national water policy of India. Then how the national water policy can be effectively implemented in India. Then few self evaluation questions: what is the importance of IWR in watershed management plans? Then discuss salient features of successful water management policy. What are the important points to be considered for integrated water policy? What are the important watershed management policies and guidelines? Then what are the important steps to be considered in watershed plans and appraisal? Then some assignment questions: how a typical RWR scheme can be implemented in a watershed? What are the basic requirements of national water policy? Illustrate important features of good water legislation. Discuss various organization framework for water legislation. What are the important watershed implementation issues? So, one unsolved problem: develop an IWRD scheme for your watershed area. Study the various IWRD related issues in your watershed area. Then develop appropriate schemes for integrated water resource development plan in your study area, and then how you can implement the IWRDM plan. What are the main implementation issues in your area, how to monitor the implemented plans. So, this say you can develop a particular scheme for your study area. So, this in this last few lectures we discussed about the socio-economic aspects of watershed development plans or watershed management, then integrated development, and then water legislation and policies and implementation issues. So, this with this today's lecture, this module say module number 5 on socio-economic aspects of watershed management is over. So, we will go to the next module in the next lecture. Thank you.